Welcome to today's program entitled Head Lice, an expert panel discussion. This webinar is produced by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Center for Integrated Pest Management. The views expressed by our presenters are for educational purposes only and do not represent the official views or positions of the EPA or the presenters' organizations. This webinar is part of a series providing information on the importance of integrated pest management, or IPM, to community, health, and the information needed to establish and grow effective IPM programs. Welcome to today's webinar on head lice, an expert panel discussion. This is Dr. Marcia Anderson with the EPA Center for Integrated Pest Management. I have the pleasure of being your moderator. This webinar is produced by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Center for Integrated Pest Management. We'd also like to thank the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry and the Northeast IPM Center for their assistance in helping to develop this webinar. To put our topic into perspective, it should be noted that this webinar will feature information on significance on head lice for school nurses and school officials. Our panelists will dispel many head lice myths and old wives' tales and ineffective control practices. They will emphasize the importance of communication to parents about student head lice incidents. And they will also emphasize the IPM steps that you can take to prevent and control head lice transference at your school. Protecting the health of American citizens is important to the Environmental Protection Agency. Children, the elderly, and health-impaired persons face increased risks to their health when they're unnecessarily exposed to pests and pesticides. For this reason, the EPA recommends that all schools, childcare, healthcare, and other community centers implement programs that promote the safe use of pesticides and integrated pest management. Effective pesticide safety and IPM programs address not only the safety concerns of using pesticides, but also the causes of why pests such as head lice may frequent your facility. As a result, IPM provides all people an effective and sustainable alternative to pesticide-centric methods of pest control. IPM principles apply to all aspects of pest management, including head lice, and are based on the accurate ID of the pest and its life stages, for head lice, including non-viable and hatch nits. The prevention through cultural and educational means. The selection of appropriate intervention actions when needed. Monitoring, record keeping, and evaluation. IPM is proactive rather than reactive approach to pest management. At this time, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our presenters. First is Emily Poland, a registered nurse. She graduated with her Bachelor of Nursing from the University of Maine in 1998. After working for a few years in the acute care setting, she has transitioned to school nursing, where she works primarily with pre-K through 8th grade. She is currently the state school nurse consultant for the Maine Department of Education and is approaching completion of her Master's of Public Health from the University of New England. Next is Dr. Shirley Countryman Gordon, and she's the co-director of the Florida School Nurse Research Initiative and the director of the Head Lice Treatment and Prevention Project, including active telehealth and consultant practice. She is president of the International Association of Human Caring and the National Board for the Certification of School Nurses. She's published her work in multiple national and international nursing journals and has received funding to support her research and service efforts in the areas of persistent head lice, disability, delegation, and school nursing. Finally, Dr. Richard Pollack is the Senior Environmental Public Health Officer at Harvard University and a public health entomologist serving academia and government. He is the Chief Scientific Officer operating Identify Us, a consulting firm. He has traveled the globe to study, teach about, and guide policy issues relevant to medically relevant pests, such as mosquitoes, lice, ticks, bedbugs, and the microbes that they transmit. At this point, I'd like each of the presenters to give us a little bit of background with some incidents that they have had to deal with bedbugs. Emily, would you like to start off?
Sure, and I think that you meant head lice. That's what
I'm
we're
sorry.
talking about today.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So as you said, I'm Emily Poland. My experience has been as a school nurse. So I've dealt with head lice with the issue as a parent, as a school nurse, and also as someone who has had it as an adult. Just as a short story or about what I have dealt with as a professional, as a school nurse. One of the schools that I worked in, when I first started there, they had it was their practice to hire a couple of hairdressers, local hairdressers, to do school-wide head checks after every 3-day weekend or holiday or vacation to try to identify kids with head lice. Not only was it very expensive because they paid these hairdressers to do that, but it was a waste of the students' time. It was a waste of, and it also was interfered with the their own privacy. I mean, it was not done in a private setting. So I think that what I'm trying to say with this story is that we've come a long ways from what we used to think about head lice, or what schools used to think about head lice, and recognizing it as something that we can just deal with it as it comes, and trying to keep kids in school where they belong.
Thank you, Emily. Shirley, how about you?
Thank you. I have been the director of the Head Lice Treatment and Prevention Project at Atlantic University since 1996, and I came to the study of head lice because my area of research interest is chronic communicable conditions that carry a stigma, and head lice fits all of those. Much of my work has been focused on children with chronic head lice and working with families caring for children with persistent head lice. Part of my role in the project is I have the opportunity to do thousands of home visits to those families that are continuing to struggle with chronic cases of head lice.
Richard, your turn.
Sure. Yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with lice and many other creatures for many decades now, and lice have been very good to me. Fascinating beasts to study in the laboratory and in the field. I've actually served as host because that's the easiest way to maintain them. But in this case, they've always been enclosed in little secure chambers attached to my arm. But a quick story as another way that lice have been good to me. Many years ago, when my daughter was very young and we're trying to get her into a particular child care center, I was at the bottom of the list for months and months. But one day they had a presumed lice outbreak at that center. They called me in to have a look. I did, and we found that none of the kids that they had identified as having lice actually were infested with lice. These all were misidentifications. It led to an outbreak of smiles and relief all the way around. And how did that help me? Well, my daughter went from the bottom of the list to the very top within a day.
Well, thank you, Richard. Very interesting. Some have tried using mayonnaise before on a child's head and say it was very successful in the treatment of lice, much cheaper than chemical treatments and non-irritating to a child's scalp. Do any non-medication treatments, such as smothering the lice with a heavy coating of thick lotion, work? Dr. Pollack, would you like to take a shot at that one?
Sure. Yeah, lice are air-breathing organisms. So if you cut off their air supply, they will become physiologically burdened, and they will slow down, stop moving, and eventually will die. There are some products out there that are labeled for this purpose, but mayonnaise is not one of them. So I would suggest we reserve mayonnaise for our sandwiches and our salads, and not use them on children's scalps.
Thank you very much. Okay, Emily, this one's for you. Are there any home remedies that are effective in treating lice and nits versus using pesticides? I currently recommend using coconut shampoo conditioner and green tea shampoo conditioner. This seems to have really worked for me. My daughter hasn't had lice for over 2 years by shampooing with these products every day. Your comments?
So I think that this question here or slide is actually asking for comment on two different things, treatment and prevention. So none of the home remedies, such as with our previous slide, the mayonnaise, or any other home remedy that have been have research to back up the claims. So some of the home treatments could be considered dangerous if you're using substances that are not meant to be on the skin. They could do harm to the children. So I would not recommend anything be used that it is not labeled for. And then it's best to use products that have some research to back them up. And there's always going to be some anecdotal evidence about this treatment or that treatment. You know, it worked for me or it didn't work for me. But that doesn't mean that it's going to work for everyone. And the other comment is using coconut shampoo and green tea shampoo or conditioner, as it sounds like this person is using it as a preventative product. Again, you could end up spending quite a bit of money on preventative shampoos and conditioners without much success. So unless there is some sort of research to back that up, I'm not sure I would spend money on that sort of thing. It could be that this child maybe hasn't been exposed to head lice, and that could be why she has not gotten head lice in 2 years.
Thank you.
And this is Dr. Gordon. I would just like to add that many of the recipes or instructions that you read on the internet related to these home remedies also involve combing. That once various products, oil-based products are placed or conditioners are placed on the hair for an extended period of time, and it'll vary depending on the site that you are reviewing, then they recommend combing through the hair. And it's more than likely the combing through the hair that's actually doing any kind of benefit in terms of treating the head lice.
All right. For Emily, does there always need to be a treatment when live nits are found?
So it's difficult to know with the naked eye if a nit on a hair is actually a viable nit. And because of that, I would not recommend treatment just based on the presence of nits. So treatment would be warranted if there was live lice present. That means bugs crawling around. Then again, not all treatments even kill the eggs. So treating based on just the presence of nits, again, you're going to be using resources such as your time and your money. That's not necessary. That might not be necessary.
Okay, Shirley, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I would just like to add that most of the products that when you read the instructional material that comes with the products will indicate somewhere between a 75 to 80% effective rate on the nits, and so that means that there's maybe a number of nits that have been successfully treated and a number of nits that have not. But the one thing that healthcare providers agree on related to head lice is that we treat only for the presence of live lice, and that includes extended family members. So just because one person in the family has a case of live lice, you wouldn't necessarily treat everyone else unless they also had live lice.
Thank you, Shirley. Our next question will be for Richard Pollack. What treatment do you recommend first?
Well, actually, I would say before you even use the word treatment or think about treating, make sure that you're actually dealing with a genuine louse infestation. Many of the members of the audience listening today probably have already heard this, but just in case, this bears repeating. So many kids are diagnosed by someone as having lice, and immediately they begin treatment. An awful lot of those kids don't have lice and don't need to be treated. But assuming that you are dealing with a bona fide, genuine louse infestation, probably the first thing to do is to size up the child's scalp hair. Is it short, straight, and easily combed? If so, then spending some time with a really good louse comb, running it through the hair, can indeed remove the lice and their eggs. If the hair is not readily combed, or if you don't have success by combing, then I still think it makes sense to try some of the over-the-counter medications that are FDA approved. They may work for you. If they don't, then move on and speak with your child's clinician.
Shirley, would you like to weigh in on that?
You know, I always like to weigh in on things. I would just add here that it's important for us to keep in mind that parents and other caregivers will very often treat up to 5 times before they seek help from a healthcare provider. And I couldn't agree more with Richard that the first thing is to make sure they have an active head lice infestation, which is the presence of at least one live louse, because parents may treat multiple times and when there may not even be lice present. So always start with that and then get a very good history of what they have treated with already before you recommend moving forward.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll have Emily. Do you have recommendations for families who cannot afford the pesticide treatments?
Sure, especially if a family is associated with a school will frequently offer to help a family that struggles to purchase an over-the-counter treatment. And just as a note, that over-the-counter treatments can be purchased for, they're not very expensive. But for those that can't afford, and mechanical removal is always an option. Well, not always. It could be an option. In my own experience, if the hair is readily combed, you could rid yourself of a head lice infestation by just mechanically removing with a good metal louse comb. The challenge with that is that there's a major time commitment and for several days. It's not just a once and done. So mechanical removal can be a way to get rid of head lice for very little money, or maybe a school could set up a way to help families that maybe can't afford the treatment.
Thank you. And our next question will be, starting with Dr. Pollack. What is considered overexposure to treatment?
Sure. Well, if you don't have lice and you've been treated, you've been overexposed, unnecessarily exposed to the treatment, no matter how safe that material may be. Other ways you might be overexposed is if the material is applied in any manner that is inconsistent with the labeling. So certainly everyone should read, understand, and follow the directions carefully. If it calls for a 4-minute treatment and then the product washed out, or a 10-minute treatment then washed out, follow that guidance. Do not apply for 14 hours if only 4 minutes is the instruction. So similarly, if it calls for a second treatment 7 days or 10 days later, then follow that advice. Don't treat every other day or every day just to be that much quote unquote safer, because it isn't.
Emily, would you like to weigh in on that?
I do. I would just emphasize with that a lot of, I've seen it a lot as a school nurse, that families feel like they're doing something by treating sooner than that 7 to 10 days, whatever is recommended on the package, to really educate our families that they don't treat until that time has passed.
Shirley, do you have anything to add?
One thing I would also like to recommend in terms of following the manufacturer instructions is also related to how you are washing the product out of the hair. Most of the products will tell you to wash it out over the sink so that you're not exposing the rest of the child's skin to the pesticide product, because the product can be absorbed through the skin as well. So another form of overexposure might occur through that. And we certainly don't ever want to use these products prophylactically. So if you hear a rumor that someone in the school has lice, don't run out, buy the product and use it to prevent your child from getting head lice. These are to be used for active infestations.
Okay. The next question. Can mechanical removal be as effective as chemical treatment? Emily, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think I spoke to it a little bit already, that if the hair can be combed, so it's nice if it's straight hair and like a hair type that can be readily combed, then mechanical removal can be as effective, although it will be time consuming. Hair that's not so easily combed, very curly hair, for example, it would be very difficult to remove with a comb.
Richard, do you have something to add?
Well, yeah, I agree completely with what you just heard. I would just add that a comb is not a comb is not a comb. And several of the items that are pictured here, some of these might work, but you really need a fairly modern specialized comb with teeth that are very close together, and you need to use it in the correct manner. So some of the plastic combs are really not of much use. They can provide some benefit, but a good metal comb is by far better.
Okay, our next question. Can lice transfer through combs, brushes, and helmets by clinging on to loose strands of hair? Emily?
So yes, it's possible for head to remain attached to pieces of hair that stay in a comb and then a brush. And then presumably would be possible then for that to be passed along to the next person that uses it. But
okay, Richard.
Generally, I was going to say it's very rare, I would say. So.
Yeah, so that's sort of like asking, is it possible that a meteorite might fall and hit me right now? Of course it's possible. The likelihood of that happening, however, is vanishingly tiny, or at least I hope so. So I've actually engaged in work to try to study how often lice or their eggs might transfer to inanimate objects like combs, brushes, helmets, headphones, theater seats, and so forth. And I've been fairly amazed, as have colleagues elsewhere who've tried this independently. We've never been able to demonstrate it. So it's possible, but I really wouldn't worry about it at all.
Shirley, would you like to chime in on this?
Well, I agree with everything Rich and Emily have said, and I am familiar with some of the work by Rick Spear, who actually took brushes and combs and used them on children that had lice infestations, and then did find lice, but each one of them that they found had sustained some sort of physical injury, so that they were unable to transmit an infestation because of the damage to their legs and other parts of their body. So very, very unlikely. And the problem with continuing to share this information with parents is they spend their time, energy, and resources on fomite transmission, which all of these are, rather than on the things that would really make a difference to their child. So the answer is it possible? Yes. Likely? No.
Okay, do we need to disinfect helmets after being used by the children? And how do we keep helmets free of cross-contamination of head lice? Dr. Pollack, would you like to take that one?
Well, I think we've already pretty much addressed it, that the chances of lice being on or in a helmet are just incredibly tiny. They're so small that we shouldn't worry about it. What's far more important is that we don't forget how valuable helmets are to protecting the precious heads of the children. Too many schools have locked up their helmets because of fears of head lice. That should never happen. The kids that are out there on scooters, bicycles, swinging bats, and so forth should be wearing helmets, whether any of those kids have lice or not. If anyone is particularly concerned about it, all they need to do is take a rag and brush out the inside of a helmet and smile.
Thank you. And our next question is, should the school nurse check for nits upon a child's return to school after treatment? Should the school nurse notify anyone as to the results of the check? Emily?
So when a child comes back to school after they've been treated for head lice, and it would not be checking for nits, the school nurse may be checking for live lice. Again, just nits alone are not going to be, you wouldn't treat with just nits. So you would be checking for live lice. Now, should the school nurse notify anyone as to the results? Well, I suppose you would probably want to communicate with the parent. Other than that, no, it's not anyone else's business of what that check resulted in.
Shirley, do you have anything to add?
Well, I agree with Emily, especially when she says you need to be aware of what the policies are in your school. I think the recommended policy would be that the school nurse not check for nits upon a child's return to school, but that the child just simply goes back to school. Because if she checked and found lice or found nits, our recommendation would be that the child goes back to class and not miss any more school. Certainly they could communicate that to the parent, but I wouldn't put the nurse in the position of being the gateway to come back to school after having a treatment for head lice. It's one of the reasons parents tend not to want to share this information with the school nurse, because they're concerned that the child somehow will either be excluded from school if that's the policy, or that somehow they'll be labeled and stigmatized as a result of having lice. And she's absolutely right. You only share information with persons that have a need to know, and there's no one in the school that has a need to know the child has lice.
Can I weigh in on this as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so I agree with everything that was said, but I'll take this one step further, and that is many schools bring in parent volunteers or deputize office staff or custodians or others to check kids' heads for lice. I don't think that's a wise policy or program. I think if anyone is touching or examining a child in school, it should be a medical professional and leave everybody else out of the picture.
I absolutely agree.
Thank you. Our next question: should summer camps abandon head lice screening of each child who comes to the camp? Shirley?
Well, this is a great question. I'm a little outside of school nursing practice, but many school nurses do work at summer camps. So what I would say to this is that camps are different from schools. Camps are living environments where children are going to spend most of their waking hours and many times hours away into the night together doing a lot of activities. So the decision on whether or not to screen or not screen for head lice has a different focus. In summer camps, I think if they are going to have a screening policy for each child, that needs to be well communicated. The screening needs to be conducted by trained healthcare professionals, and that a treatment plan would need to be in place. I don't think you should ever send children home from camp because they have lice, or isolate them in any way because they had lice. We have to be very careful about how we're managing letting people know which children have lice in a camp situation. It's very difficult to keep things quiet in these situations. But again, it's going to depend on the summer camp's policy and the understanding that the transmission might be of more concern in this setting than it would be in a school.
Emily, would you like to chime in?
Sure. I think that I agree with what Shirley's shared, but and one of my caveats would be that if a camp is going to have that as their protocol or their policy when they start their camp, that it's done in a private way, and that the child does not have to go home, but there needs to be some sort of process for what they're going to do for that child, to treat it and then to allow that child to stay at the camp.
Richard, do you have anything else to add?
Only that if the kids are complaining of any health-related things, certainly a medical professional should check them. But I don't like the idea of the kids being screened, whether at school or at camp. If someone's going to be checking the kids for an infestation of any sort, I would say check them for ticks. It's much more significant.
Thank you. The next question. Can a school district without a school nurse allow a student with live head lice infestation to remain in the school? Emily, you want to start on that?
Sure. A school district with or without a school nurse can and should allow a child with active infestation of head lice to remain at school. So if a child is discovered to have head lice, maybe they were itchy and were sent to the nurse, then the child should be sent back to class. Absolutely, you need to notify the parent and let the parent know and help the parent decide what their first steps are going to be. But that child shouldn't miss any school. Missing school days because of head lice is really not acceptable.
Richard, did you want to add?
Only that that by the time a child is found to be infested, he or she likely has been infested for weeks or a month or more already. So they're already guilty, if you want to put it that way. What's a few more hours? What's a few more days? It really is not of any significance. Let the kid stay in school, notify the parent or the caregivers, give them good information as to what to do, but don't vilify the child. There's no need to do that.
Thank you. Next.
Can I just
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Can I just add one other thing? Is that we need to make it less, it's not an emergency. This isn't something that the parent needs to be notified of immediately. And I think that if we can get away from the emergency, the emergent, it will help reduce the stigma associated with it.
Great. So, should the school nurse provide parent training for how to identify and treat head lice? Emily?
Sure, I have provided training to parents in the past on how to check for head lice and how to treat it, and mostly it's going through and reading and reinforcing that they want to follow directions on packaging. I have spoken to a parent organization before, doing a short presentation on kind of trying to educate about the actual risks of head lice and what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. But you're not going to get all parents that way at like a parent organization meeting. So I would say that it's important to send home kind of like a lice basics at the beginning of the school year, and then a few reminders throughout the year, what to look for, what to do if you see something, as a way to say, head lice is probably always in the school. This is your notification of that. And always encourage parents to reach out to their school nurse.
Great. Next, should school nurses refer families to their pediatrician if head lice are discovered? First, confirm it's actually a head lice. Emily?
So if a nurse is unsure about whether or not it's head lice, then they should definitely refer to the primary care provider. But an experienced nurse is pretty able to accurately detect head lice. Definitely you could refer to the doctor. It can be part of the suggested recommendations, but it's not required because they could use over-the-counter treatments. Going to the doctor is not necessarily the first step.
Okay, Richard, do you have something to add?
No, I think that covers it all very well.
Okay, great. Next, should school nurses be picking out nits or identifying lice or nits only? Emily?
So I guess I think the answer to this depends on the nurse and the extent of the problem, as well as the nurse's caseload. For kids with chronic cases, it might be necessary to help the family mechanically remove some live lice that are found. But removing nits from a child's hair, that should not be part of what the nurse does, and it should definitely never take precedence over other nursing duties. The nurse needs to be able to respond and complete the nursing care that's required as being a school nurse. Acute illnesses and injuries and chronic conditions, and not be taking up too much time with head lice.
Next, have you seen any increase in the incidence of lice among older children because of the popularity of taking selfies head-to-head with friends? Shirley?
This is a great question because this phenomenon kind of went viral about 2 years ago, and there really is no evidence to suggest that taking selfies promotes head-to-head transmission of head lice on older children. We just don't see as many cases on older children as we do on younger children because they have developed a sense of personal space. And the time your head is together to take a selfie would not be a sufficient enough time for head lice to transfer from head to head. So again, one of those things, is it possible theoretically? Yes. Is it probable? Very, very unlikely.
Richard, would you like to chime in?
No, that says it all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next, would any of the presenters have any recommendations on head lice management and policy for private schools and early child care centers for children under 5 years of age, where children are more likely to come in head-to-head contact based on their age and environment? Shirley.
What I would say to this is I would treat younger children in very much the same way I would treat any age child. And the only difference in this age group is I would probably want to focus more on parental awareness and parental training. We want the children to behave as children. We don't want to interfere with how they are interacting with one another, how they're playing with one another. And as adults, it's our responsibility to screen children for head lice. And by screen, I'm talking about parents periodically checking their child's head for lice and treating lice when it becomes apparent. But as far as school policy for private schools and early childhood centers for children under the age of 5, I would not change the recommendations.
Next. Can head lice be acquired from sleeping in a bed or sharing a bed of an infested person? For instance, preschool nap time. Shirley.
I think head-to-head transmission, sleeping in a bed or sharing a bed at home, is probably a likely way in which head lice are transmitted within the family. Preschool nap time, I don't think children really are head-to-head that often. It is possible, but you could accommodate that by looking at your space allocation for nap time. But one of the research studies I did identify sleeping in a bed with more than one person, with the average being 4 people, was a risk factor for chronic infestations.
Richard, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree with that. And I think it's important also to note that the lice are going to if they do transfer, they're going to transfer from the scalp hair of one child to the scalp hair of another. They're not going to infest the pillow, the bed, the blankets, the toys, or any of those other inanimate objects. And should that actually happen, those lice are not going to live very long. They will starve to death, dry out in just a matter of hours in most cases.
Thank you. Next, if the primary method of transmission is through hair-to-hair contact, which doesn't occur often at a school, why is there a significant increase of children getting lice? Shirley?
That's another great question, and I know that people think a head lice is very prevalent, and it is not uncommon, but we are not seeing a dramatic increase in the number of children getting head lice. We don't have really good numbers on this. It's not considered a communicable disease that has significant impact, so we don't track it in the way that we track other conditions, other childhood conditions. So I think the question at its base is, why is there a significant increase in children getting lice? I would say is incorrect. We do not have an increase in the number of children getting lice.
Oh, thank you. Next, am I hearing that for the parents that will not do the work required for their children to be lice-free, we should just ignore these children and tell the educators to do the same? Protective Services says this is not an issue that they will deal with. What are your thoughts? Shirley?
Well, I think this is great timing for this question because there's probably a lot of participants that are out there going, am I really to tell my principal and teachers and parents that I'm sending children with live lice back to school? And the answer to that is yes. We send children with lice and nits back to class. We don't ignore these children. We work with the families, continue to work with the families and help them with the resources that they might need to have a successful head lice treatment plan for their child. And the Protective Services is quite right. This is not an issue that they are interested in it because it's not an indicator of neglect or abuse. So it is for the school nurse to try and build a relationship with parents and other caregivers. And once they know that you have their child's best interests at heart, because lice can be uncomfortable. Many children have significant itching and scratching associated with head lice. Some children have sleep interruptions associated with head lice. So it's not a condition we want to ignore, but it is a condition that we don't want to disrupt the child's learning over.
Next, my concerns are for those students who have chronic or persistent and untreated lice and how to deal with that in the school setting. Shirley?
Well, this is the area of my most of my research study related to lice. And persistent head lice or chronic head lice is a kind of a unique phenomenon. Every school has a handful of one or two or more families that seem to have a problem with lice over and over and over again. One of the things that I'm trying to do is move the awareness from head lice, and particularly chronic head lice, as an individual child phenomenon to looking at it as a family and community phenomenon. So what I mean by that is rather than just focus on the single child that has lice, once a case has become chronic, we need to look at the whole family. And what I do through the Head Lice Treatment and Prevention Project is home visits, where I actually do the good old-fashioned public health contact tracing, where I screen all of the family members that are in the family and have significant contact with the child that seems to be getting lice over and over again. In 100% of the cases, I found at least one other family member or close contact that had head lice and was asymptomatic. So it was often an older sibling or a grandparent that had head lice, may have some scratching, but the mild scratching that thought it might be dandruff, and was actually the cause of the reinfestation. And once we were able to successfully treat everyone in the family, then the chronic case was resolved.
Thank you. Next, what do you do with adversarial parents that are non-compliant and have been educated numerous times? Shirley?
Well, the tone of this question tells me that there's an adversarial relationship between the healthcare provider, the school nurse, and the parents. And what often happens when a condition isn't resolving, we tend to start blaming one another. The healthcare provider might think that the parent is non-compliant, which is a term we try to avoid using, or parents start to think the school is the source of the infestation, and so they're kind of at odds with one another. So what I do in cases like this is I really sit down with the parents and again get a full history of what they have done, recognize what they've done, and support them to continue in their efforts to eradicate the lice from their child. Although some parents can be very difficult to work with, nurses are used to that. And head lice can cause a very emotional response, particularly if they've had it over and over and over again, as they might have in the case of chronic head lice. But my best takeaway here is don't give up on them and continue to try and work with them and try and avoid that adversarial relationship.
Next, when a family that has chronic head lice, what do you recommend that school nurses do to help them get rid of the lice when they've tried over-the-counter treatments as well as prescriptions? Shirley?
All right, so there's a common theme that runs through chronic head lice cases, and the first one is identify that they actually still have a head lice infestation. Many times when families have treated and retreated using over-the-counter products, they do what Rich described earlier, which is they put it on and then they leave it on longer. And then the more times you are unsuccessful in your treatment, the more desperate parents can become. So if a product says leave it on for 10 minutes, they'll leave it on for 2 hours or even overnight with a shower cap. And what happens is that the scalp of the child can become excoriated. And most of the products are scalp irritants. The predominant symptom for head lice, whether it's chronic or just an individual case of head lice, is itching. So if the child is itching and then scratching because of a head lice infestation, then the parents treat with a product. That product can cause increased scalp irritation and itching. So the child then itches from being exposed to the product. So parents can, or children can get in a situation where they have an itch treatment cycle, where they have a head lice infestation and they itch. So parents treat, and then they itch because of the sensitivity to the product or irritation from the product. And then children itch, and then they treat, and they itch, and they treat, and they go on in this cycle until the scalp can be very irritated. So always begin with, do they have an active infestation? And then number 2, what is the treatment history? Try and identify what they have actually treated with. The over-the-counter products vary in their ingredients, but there are 2 primary ingredients, although they do have some more of the natural products out there now. So it's important to know what they have treated with. Find out if they've done any lice and nit removal, manual removal. And again, then look at the type of hair they have, and if it's hair that can be combed and reasonably combed without causing a lot of discomfort to the child, then I would try manual delousing. If they don't, then certainly refer them to a prescribing healthcare provider, because there are some prescription items now that are more effective than some of the over-the-counter products can be.
Okay, next. If a district has a no lice policy, would it be best to prepare an action plan or protocol based on the evidence? Emily?
So if a district has no policy, so they don't have any policy at all, what would it be best to prepare an action plan or protocol? I think that, yes, it would be better to prepare either an action plan or protocol rather than a policy, because a policy has to go through many layers of being approved. So they're not very nimble. If you're going to have anything, have a protocol. And so that can change based on changing research or based on the case. You know, if you're working with an individual family that, like, they're struggling with the chronic head lice, you don't want to be stuck to have to follow your school's policy. It'll end up getting your district it'll come back against the district because someone will come and say, well, you're not following your policy. So if anything, I would do just an action plan or protocol, but it would be best to be individualized for a family or a student that has head lice.
Okay, our next question is going to go to Dr. Pollack. Do you have advice for preparing families and communities for elimination of no-nit policies and allowing students with live lice to remain in school until the end of the school day?
Sure. Well, I think we've already covered this, but I'll explain it in a slightly different way. So again, the kids, you should expect to find lice in virtually every community on virtually every day. At least one child is likely to have lice. That should be okay. I know people want to go to 0, but getting to 0 is very difficult and expensive, and it's unrealistic. So chill out. If you have a policy and you want to go towards, well, I've never seen a policy that I've been happy with when it comes to lice. So as we just heard, probably better to have protocols rather than policies. Just do away with the no-nit policy. It does absolutely no good. It actually criminalizes kids and their parents. It's counterproductive. So just, and I think the same is true with live lice. let the parents or the caregivers know about it, and then move on. Don't try to outlaw it because you're not going to be successful.
Next, should head lice no longer be a subject of a school's IPM plan or policy? Richard.
Well, okay. Most IPM plans in schools look at the sorts of pests that infest the building. So cockroaches, occasionally bed bugs, beetles, and so forth. Only recently have people begun to think about putting head lice in there because, after all, they are insects as well, and they cause an infestation, but not of the building, only the scalp. I'm of the feeling that lice are more, it should be in the realm of the medical professional, not of the people who normally do with IPM programs, because you're not going to get a pest control operator to come in and treat a child or the school for head lice. You shouldn't. Leave it up to the school nurse if you have one.
Next question. Shirley. If there's more than one child with lice in a classroom, do we continue with the no letter home to parents or calling parents directly?
Well, this is a question related to notification. And what I recommend is that, and I think Emily addressed this earlier, is that you send out instructional information at the beginning of the school year to raise awareness about the possibility of head lice being in the community at any given day, and how families should observe their children for lice and treat when necessary, and notify the school nurse if a case is located. When we send letters home to parents, what often happens is parents read that as that there's a head lice outbreak or epidemic in the school, and then they start trying to find out who patient 0 is, and then they also try and figure out what they can do to treat prophylactically to keep their child from getting head lice, which in some cases, in my experience, has included keeping their child home until they get the all clear letter from the school. So there's a lot of good reasons to not use a letter home to parents. I think it is appropriate to contact individual parents and let them know that their child has lice if the school nurse has had the opportunity to diagnose that in their child, or to send written material home at that time. But I would never send out a broad notification to an entire classroom or school related to head lice.
Thank you, Shirley. I'm sorry, Emily, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that if
Okay.
calling parents directly. No, when calling parents directly, as a school nurse, I've had parents call the school nurse directly and say, well, I heard that so-and-so has head lice. Can you tell me if there are other kids in the classroom? And I think that the response to that should also be very carefully worded, that, there's always someone at school with head lice, and that providing any further information is not appropriate.
Mm-hmm. But again,
Great.
that opportunity to educate that particular parent, because clearly there's a concern. So what can that parent do, and how can we alleviate some of that parent's concerns?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next. On finding head lice on a child, do you recommend no notification of other parents? And at what point is the education of parents undertaken in relation to an occurrence, or is it a practice to be done at the start of the school year? Shirley.
I think we addressed that with the last question. And again, just to reiterate, we're not recommending broad screening in schools, but if a child is sent to the school nurse, or particularly for scratching or sleeping in class or some other symptom, and the school nurse diagnoses head lice, then certainly you would recommend the individual parents, but not all the parents in the class. And I also would not recommend at that point doing extending the screening. I know different people recommend different things, where you might screen close friends of the child or siblings of that child, and then extend the screening circle out as necessary. But we really are trying to move away from screening in schools. As far as parent education, I think anytime there's an opportunity to educate, we should educate parents. And so I definitely would send out information at the beginning of the school year and then prior to any major break, like the spring or winter break that schools have, about head lice and being aware of the need to check your children for head lice. And then again, when there is a case of head lice, educating the individual parents that are impacted.
Thank you. The next question is going to go to Shirley. Should the school nurse notify the teacher only with live lice and nits close to the scalp? And please explain.
Okay, so the answer to that is no, and here's why. The school nurse has a need to know if a child has lice or nits if it's being diagnosed in the health room. The teacher does not have a need to know that that child has head lice. The teacher should not be treating any child with lice differently than a child that didn't have lice. So there's really no need for that teacher to know. And we don't want teachers to treat children differently if they do know. So, but mainly it's because it's based on the need to know and FERPA and HIPAA requirements.
Richard, did you have anything to add?
Again, I agree. A need-to-know basis. Keep it confidential. Respect the privacy of the child and his caregivers.
Okay, next question. Another notification question. Does promoting a hush-hush strategy regarding head lice further perpetuate the stigma and fear regarded to head lice? Shirley?
Well, we don't use a different hush-hush strategy for head lice than we use for confidentiality related to any health condition. So I think that we need to think about it in the context of keeping confidential all health information and disclosing it only to those persons that have a need to know. So again, I wouldn't pull out head lice as being different from any other health condition.
Richard, did you have something to add?
Well, yeah, if a child was diagnosed with a highly communicable, readily transmitted, and highly significant from a health standpoint condition, then of course people would be told about it. Those people who need to know, particularly those that are close contacts. But we're not dealing with that with head lice. Talking to most parents, you would think that head lice were the most atrocious thing that would ever befall their child. But no, we should treat this for what it is, a relatively trivial annoyance that can be taken care of. And it's not a hush-hush strategy. It's a respectful strategy to protect the privacy of those involved.
Okay, next question. Do you need to vacuum carpets in classrooms on a daily basis to prevent head lice transmission? Shirley?
Again, the short answer to that is no. There's no evidence to suggest that head lice that they infest the carpets or anywhere else in the classrooms, on upholstered furniture or anything like that. So you would not want to institute a policy that would essentially be ineffective. There have been some studies that have in which the carpets have been vacuumed following an outbreak of head lice, and they did not find any lice on the carpets.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Since lice is transmitted head to head, how important is it to teach parents about cleaning the home environment, like putting linens in the dryer for 30 minutes or vacuuming or washing down beds and bedding? Shirley?
I think that for a long time we have made these recommendations about environmental cleaning associated with head lice. And again, we now know that the head lice live only on the human head. They're not living anywhere else in the house. So they're not infesting the beds, the mattresses, the furniture, and the carpeting. So again, parents have a tendency to focus on things like cleaning the home instead of focusing on getting the lice off their children. I've had the opportunity to visit homes where people have literally bleached their house from ceiling to floor very concerned about lice inside the home. Same thing as being in the car, for example, if they have upholstered seating in the car. So we no longer recommend this. However, if there are some items that they are particularly concerned with, for example, a stuffed animal that their child sleeps closely with each night, again, the likelihood of a louse being on that stuffed animal is very small. But from a psychological perspective, if they wanted to put that stuffed animal in the dryer for 30 minutes, I think that would be acceptable with the understanding that it is, a psychological comfort. This is not going to help reduce transmission of head lice in the home.
Okay.
But I would recommend washing, personal items of clothing that they're wearing while you treat them for lice. And most people will wash the sheets and pillowcases, but even that is not completely necessary.
Okay. The next question. Last time I checked a government website, it still recommended bagging stuffed animals for 2 weeks for kids who had head lice. That seems unnecessarily long. Your thoughts, Shirley?
Okay, so again, this is very similar to the last question. And we did used to recommend bagging everything, and people literally bagged their entire home for 2 weeks. That was based on the life cycle of the louse and the eggs. But we now know that that's totally unnecessary. And unfortunately, it still appears on the CDC website. So my recommendation would be not to bag anything for any length of time.
Can I weigh in here?
Oh, go ahead.
And if anyone from CDC is listening, take the opportunity to update the website.
Yes.
Okay, next question. Can a non-mated, non-pregnant female louse still lay non-fertile eggs? Richard, you want to take that one?
Sure. The only stage of a louse that could lay an egg is the adult female. No other stage can lay eggs, no matter how much they might want to. And the female, once she begins to feed on blood, starts to produce eggs, several per day. And if she has mated, then many of her eggs may indeed be fertile. They'll go on and develop to some extent. From the louse's perspective, hopefully they'll give rise to another generation. From our perspective, hopefully not. If the louse, as the louse ages, she becomes less and less able to produce as many eggs, and fewer of those eggs are fertile. But she'll still lay them. And similarly, if she's never had a chance to mate, she'll still lay eggs. But those eggs are not going to produce hatchlings. They're only good for very tiny omelets.
Okay, the next question. Where do head lice originate? I get this question asked by a lot of child care providers. Shirley?
Well, head lice have been around since antiquity, and you can see here that there's in the picture on the slide, that there's a very old lice comb. Where they actually originated, I don't know that anyone can say for sure. Rich, do you have a thought on this?
Well, my interpretation of all the data available is that they've evolved along with us. They're very closely related to what we call body lice, but they're different in so many ways. Kids in this country don't get body lice. I've never seen them on a child here. But they're so closely related that one likely had adapted from the other. So there's a little bit of evolution occurring here. Our non-human primates, such as our friend pictured in the middle of this slide, very likely has his or her own lice that are related but different from our lice. So that's
so
the
they've
best.
been around as long as humans have been around.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Richard, do outside temperatures affect their life?
Well, if you take a louse off of a person's scalp and throw them in the snow, it certainly would get chilled. But in reality, it's a constant temperature and humidity on the scalps of children, except for a few minor moments if they're out running in the sun in the summer or running outside without a hat in the wintertime. But those are relatively brief exposures. It's about 31 degrees centigrade on the scalp, regardless of the season or where you are in the world. And that's all that matters to the lice.
Thank you. The next question, exactly how do head lice feed? Richard?
They have tiny little microscopic stylets which they avert out of the front of the head of the louse. They penetrate deftly into the skin, a tiny fraction of a millimeter. The louse does not penetrate itself into the skin. It doesn't burrow. It can't. It's only this little straw-like projection that goes into the skin. It finds a capillary, sucks a tiny, insignificant amount of blood, and then pulls back its mouth parts and sits and digests for the next few hours.
Okay, next question. How long can head lice live off of the body? And can you give us a better idea, like the number of hours? Richard?
As soon as the louse is removed from a person's scalp, the clock is ticking, and it's ticking very rapidly. The lice begin to lose water via evaporation, and the lice, because they're living creatures, they're metabolizing, they're using up their precious nutrient reserves. It's very difficult to keep lice alive in the laboratory, even under ideal conditions, if you don't feed them at least once a day, and ideally many times per day. So the take-home message is this: if lice are knocked off or fall off or crawl off on their own onto a pillowcase or bed linen or onto a rug, by the afternoon of that same day, there's a very good chance that those lice are dead. And if any lice fall off or are knocked off in school, they're all going to be dead by the time the school opens in the morning. So there's no need to do anything. If you want to vacuum the floors, as was discussed earlier, that should be done because floors get pretty filthy. But don't do it because you think it's going to control the lice. It won't.
Okay, here's a comprehensive list of head lice resources. Don't forget to download the PDF of this webinar so you'll have this valuable resource list for future reference. If you missed any of our previous webinars or wish to recommend them to colleagues, please visit our website for links for on-demand viewing. Okay, now on to the head lice questions posed by you, the attendees. The first question is, are there any community resources to help low-income families get rid of and prevent lice in the home and also on students? Would anyone like to weigh in on that one?
This is Shirley. I think the available resources are going to vary community by community, but I think the school nurses can reach out to their local pharmacies to see if they have any kind of a plan, and PTAs or PTOs now can help families by providing resources. Many of the lice treatment clinics that seem to be popping up on every street corner will sometimes offer a sliding scale for treatment, although that treatment can be very, very expensive. So again, it's going to vary, and it may take some effort on the part of the school nurse to increase awareness that these resources are needed.
Okay, here's another good question. What about using blow dryers or bonnet-type hair dryers to try to discourage nits from hatching? Doesn't heat decrease the survival rate? Who would like to? Go ahead.
I'll take a stab at that. Yes, indeed. Lice are very susceptible and sensitive to environmental conditions, which is why they're up there on the scalp in the first place, and essentially no place else. There are ways of using heat and dry air that can drive off the moisture from the lice and their eggs. So you're desiccating these creatures. But It's not as simple as taking a hair dryer, and certainly not a hot air gun used for stripping paint. I've seen that, the results of that too many times. There is a particular FDA cleared device that's used in specialized centers that relies on a stream of measured hot air. So the temperature is just right, the airflow is just right, and it's used in skilled hands. So if you're going to go that route, do it right. Don't run the risk of scalding your child's scalp.
Okay, here's another question. Richard, I think this would be a good one for you. What is the difference between a nit and an egg, and how to tell the difference?
Well, it depends on which side of the big pond, the Atlantic Ocean, you're on. We tend over here to use these terms as if they mean the same thing, a nit is an egg. Many of my colleagues in Britain, however, would talk about a nit specifically as the hatched egg, the remnant left over, the empty shell after the hatchling has left. It doesn't really matter. Regardless of what you call it, if you find something that you believe is a nit or an egg on the hair, it's important to get a better look at it. Even if your visual acuity is really good, it's very difficult to distinguish whether this is a live, dead, or hatched egg. You can do it with a little bit of experience and with a microscope. But this is where I get into arguments with folks virtually every day. Many people believe that if you find what you think might be a nit or an egg, you should assume the worst, assume that the child has lice and go ahead and treat. And as you've heard over and over again through the session, you should instead be looking for live lice crawling on the scalp. That's a much better indicator. So if you see a nit or an egg, or what you think is a nit or an egg, look for live louse and don't worry about what you call those eggs.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Shirley. Children who have chronic lice are emotionally impacted. They're ostracized and their social relationships are impacted. Other students do not want to work with them if bugs are crawling around their heads. Their education is greatly impacted. Can you weigh in on this?
Yes, and I unfortunately have to agree that that does happen in many cases, particularly for children that have persistent head lice. Head lice is a stigmatizing condition, and there are several attributes that are in and of themselves stigmatizing, particularly in elementary school settings. If a child is scratching their head, the mere act of scratching in a elementary school setting is a stigmatizing condition. The presence of nits or the presence of live lice can also contribute or function as a stigmatizing condition. If you go in to have your hair done, for example, in a barber shop or a beauty shop, and they discover lice, they are required to ask you to leave in the middle of your haircut. So again, very, very stigmatizing. I say that children with chronic head lice are at risk physically due to overexposure to pesticides, educationally due to forced absences for those schools that still have a no-nit policy, and then, of course, the bigger one is emotionally. What I find is that how the parents are responding to head lice and how the adults in their world are responding to head lice is the best indicator of how much emotional impact head lice will have on a child. That's why it's so important that school nurses in particular become part of the solution and not part of the problem, where parents and caregivers feel safe and children feel safe to come to you to share with you that they have head lice, knowing that you will work with them to get it taken care of. Children can be cruel. Children can be very cruel. And today with social media, for example, the stigma associated with head lice extends far beyond the time when a case of head lice has been successfully treated. So I think we need to be aware of that. We need to watch how children are being treated, and we need to educate all of the adults in the environment related to the fact that head lice are not a serious condition and should not be as much of a concern as, say, a common cold or the flu might be. Those have possibilities for greater sequelae than head lice do, aside from the emotional morbidity associated with head lice.
I'd like to add one thing to that excellent answer, and that is that this is a societal problem that we have here, and that's shared in many so-called developed countries. If you go around the world and ask and watch, you'll notice that elsewhere people are much more relaxed about head lice. They smile about them. It's a non-issue. It's so trivial. People elsewhere in many parts of the world will think that we're absolutely ridiculous, that we worry so much about these creatures.
Okay, another question. Are you familiar with Natroba or spinosad? I am told by a pharmaceutical representative that this is the only ovicidal lice treatment that the over-the-counter products do not really work because the lice have mutated to resist them. Can someone comment on that?
Yeah, I'll grab that quickly. Let me correct some misinformation out there, and that is the notion that all lice that are on children's heads across the country are resistant to the over-the-counter medications. That's just not true. Some truly are resistant, some are partially resistant or susceptible, and yet others will completely die out in 10 minutes or so upon treatment. You can't tell simply by looking at the lice whether they're going to be resistant or susceptible. We do have a problem with resistance, but that's not surprising. There are other products that are available by prescription. You mentioned one of them, Natroba, which contains as the active ingredient a mixture of spinosins or spinosad. This material is produced by bacterial fermentation, so you could consider it to be a biorational product. It kills lice. It kills some amount of the eggs as well. There's another product out there, Lice or SK Lice, which contains as the active ingredient ivermectin. These two are very similar. Again, they're both produced by fermentation by different kinds of bacteria. They're available by prescription, and they certainly are more likely to eliminate lice than most of the over-the-counter preparations, but they can be costly, and you have to see a clinician or prescriber in order to get them. But I wouldn't say that these are the only products to use.
Okay, I have a question here from California, and it says, regarding notification, I heard you say that you don't recommend reporting when more than one case. However, what about Department of Public Health and Licensing reporting requirements for childcare centers? Much of the guidance being presented seems very different from guidance that coincides with California and Los Angeles County reporting expectations and our early education setting. Someone want to comment on that?
This is Shirley. I'll speak to that. I'm not specifically familiar with California's regulations related to that, but I can tell you that there's a lot of work that needs to be done related to regulations, both for childcare, for schools, and for beauty shops and barber shops. They often have conflicting information and reporting requirements. I do know that in terms of communicable diseases in the state of Florida, head lice does not rise to the level of a reportable disease. In most states, it doesn't. And that's part of a problem in terms of knowing how many cases of head lice we have, and people tend to overestimate the number of cases that are available in a community at any given time, but a good guess based on international data is about 20% of the overall population. So so I think it's important for healthcare providers in general to know what the regulations are so that they can help steer parents through that gauntlet of regulations and then work as healthcare providers to change policy.
Okay, it's moving along. We're down to our very last question here that we can take. It says here, in Texas, there's a state law that says that we have to send notice home to the whole classroom if a case of head lice is identified in the elementary area. Is there a way around this? Somebody want to address that?
I'll take
This
a
is Emily.
stab.
I would. Oh,
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the way around it is to contact your legislator and try to get it changed. When unfortunately, state laws are sometimes passed by well-meaning people, but that do not always understand all of the facts, and so that's unfortunate. But so contact your legislator.
And we have new knowledge, perhaps when it may be a regulation as opposed to a law, but whenever it was passed, I'm sure it was some time ago, and the recommendations coming from the authoritative sources like the AAP and the CDC are no longer recommending that.
Okay. Well, at this point, I'd like to thank our presenters, Emily Poland, Dr. Shirley Gordon, and Dr. Richard Pollack for sharing their experiences and expertise. We'd like to also thank you, all of the attendees, and this webinar is now being concluded. Thank you so much for attending. Goodbye.